Hey everybody, it's Gecko, and this time we are going to be back with another Stories from the Trail. This time it's not going to be a story off the top of my head. And this time I thought that I would tell stories from my time in the Army. Let me go ahead and turn you around. It's a nice foggy morning. So, when I say stories from the Army, you have to understand about the time period when I served in the Army. I served in the Army from September of 1989 to June of 1992. So it was before all of the bad conflicts in Haiti and Somalia and Bosnia and the Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq. It was before all of that. The last major war that we had been in was Vietnam. So at that point, military service wasn't that scary. Not like it is today. Nowadays, when guys serve and they come back, a lot of them are traumatized and messed up, and I mean, they've been severely wounded in battle, and they have PTSD really bad. When I was in the Army, we didn't have any of that. At the time, I had mixed feelings about being in the Army. But a lot of that was kind of due to getting married and having the problems with my wife. It affected my work, and I will get to that later. But I basically joined the Army right out of high school. I had a summer job after high school, working at Wendy's, flipping burgers. I was Bill on the grill, you know. If you've worked at Wendy's, you get the reference. But I joined the Army because mainly it's what my dad did. My dad was my adopted dad. He was in the Army back in he was born in 40, so it would have been in the 60s, before Vietnam. But he worked on an Army base in Ohio as a missile control specialist or something like that. He would sit in the trailer and, you know, control missiles, if I remember correctly. He didn't really talk about it too much. But I joined the Army because of that, and also the MOS, the job that I chose, had an $8,000 sign-on bonus. And back in '89, that was a lot of money. So it was light infantry, which, 11 Bravo, ground pounder. Nowadays, that's not an MOS you want to be in, because that means you're going to be on the front line, taking off all the fire and having all the firefights. So I joined the Army, and I went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I had the distinct privilege of being one of the first cohort units. Being in one of the first cohort units. And basically that was a program where the people you went to basic training and advanced infantry training with were the people you were stationed with. So when you got to your duty station and you had the very real possibility of going into a conflict, you knew the people that you were fighting with. You knew they had your back, and they knew you had their back. And that was a real experience. So basic training, man, it was hard. Granted, not as hard as it was even 10 years before I went in. They had made a lot of reforms to the way basic training was run. The drill instructors couldn't touch you at all. I mean, they could still get in your face and yell at you, but they were not allowed to lay a hand on you. But even so, even 10 years after I was in, it became a lot less stressful, because they introduced a system called, they would give recruits stress cards. And if the drill instructor was getting in your face and you were getting stressed out, you'd hand him a card, and he couldn't yell at you for like a certain length of time. If I understand that correctly. But I made some real friends when I was in basic training. I honestly wouldn't have made it through basic training without these guys. There was George Kubczynski, who, because when he joined, all he had was a pair of transition lens glasses. So every time he'd go outside, he'd basically have sunglasses on, so he got the nickname Hollywood. And he was this half Polish, half German guy from New York. So he was the least Hollywood person there, But he owned it. And then eventually we got our military issue glasses, and he just had regular glasses, but the name stuck, from that time on, he was Hollywood. And then there was another guy from Amarillo, Jesse Wilcox, and him and George Kubczynski, they became two of my really good friends. I mean, my best friends at the time. And then there was another guy from Boston that everybody called Mongoose. I don't even remember his real name. But, he was a good buddy of mine. And, there was a whole bunch of guys, and these guys they became like your brothers, But there was also some guys that, you didn't get along with, There's some in every crowd. And, but, it wasn't really bad. And then, of course, there was the one fat kid that, basically lagged behind and the rest of us would kind of suffer because of his lack of his athleticism, I guess. We'd have to do extra PT drills and stuff because he couldn't keep up. But eventually, he lost weight and he got good, you know. And he was able to keep up, and it really improved him. And we didn't let him suffer too horribly for it. I mean, there was a bunch of griping and complaining, yes, but you know, we had his back, and he knew it. And I don't really remember his name. I mean, you got to remember, this is 35, 40 years ago. Well, 35 years ago. So, you know, we did our basic training, and it was all, you know, we'd road march to our training, and we'd do our PT every morning and go on our 2-mile and 5-mile runs. And then we had our big long road march to our field exercises, where we would dig our foxhole, and we basically spent a weekend, you know, out doing maneuvers in an entrenched location. And that was an experience. And my battle buddy, at that point, he'd gotten to the point where he couldn't take it anymore, and he basically intentionally hurt his back and got a medical out. I mean, nobody ratted on him, and I'm not gonna say his name. Honestly, I don't remember his name. And we graduated. And we went immediately to we graduated on December 8th of 1989 and went immediately to our permanent duty station in Fort Drum, New York, where it was the middle of winter, 30 miles from the Canadian border. So it was, I mean, honestly, for all you Star Wars fans, it was like being on the planet Hoth. You know, I'm a Texas boy. I'd never really seen, you know, snow in that conditions before. I mean, it snowed in Texas before, but it was like being on the planet Hoth. And Empire Strikes Back. It was just, you know, with the wind chill, it was 30 below zero. It was unreal. It was like being on another planet. So we got settled in, got all our gear, and basically 2 weeks later, I got my first installment of my sign-on bonus, which was $4,000. And we took our 2-week block leave. And basically went home for Christmas, you know. Everybody went home, you know. That's what block leave means. It's the whole unit goes on leave. So I got a flight out of Albany because I drove my friend George back to his home in Schenectady, New York, and booked a flight from Albany, and flew back to Texas, where I promptly bought a car, and I met Jesse Wilcox up in Amarillo, where he was from, and we drove back to New York. I bought a brand new Geo Metro. And it was a 5-speed manual transmission, so that was fun to learn. Basically, the trip to New York was my learning curve for driving a stick, because I'd only driven standard before then. But other than one spin out incident on an interstate in, where was that? Ohio, which is where we first encountered snow, and I was playing around and hit a slick patch and spun out and ended up in the ditch. I had to call a tow truck to pull me out. We got back up to base safely and on time. Well, within 2 weeks after that, we went on our first overseas training mission, which was a reforger exercise, which is return of forces to Germany. So we flew into Nuremberg, and basically for the first 2 weeks we were in the field. We got trucked to a location and kind of hiked out in the woods and set up our camp, and we would run missions and everything from that camp, scouting. We were supposedly, quote unquote, trucked in behind enemy lines, and so the little town we were based next to, there was a bridge that went over a river. Well, we posted bridge guards on that bridge, and any enemy combatants, quote unquote, that would come through, we would have to turn them around. We were at that point, we were basically road signs. They weren't able to fire on us or do anything to us. We just said, hey, this bridge has been blown. You have to turn around and find another route. And me and George were down there one day guarding this bridge. It's cold. It's wet. It's the middle of it's, like the beginning of January at this point. Because I drove back to base with Jesse. I started on Christmas Day, and we basically took like 2-3 days to get back. So we're at this bridge. It's cold. It's misty, rainy, and this girl comes by, and I don't know if she was walking home from school or what, but she was probably in high school. And we started talking. I mean, she was speaking in German and we were speaking in English, but we were talking music, and we were into heavy metal, and so was this girl. So we started throwing out band names, and she was like, yeah, good, and whatever. And we had a good time, just talking to her. And so she leaves, and she comes back a while later with this thermos, and it has hot mulled wine in it. And that was it. I mean, we had a very good time after that. We all three of us shared that hot mulled wine, and it was so good. I'd never had anything like that before. And you got to figure, I'm like 18 at the time. So, back in the States, I wasn't even legal to drink. So, we shared it, and she went on, and we didn't see her again after that, and we went back after our bridge duty, and we never told anybody. And we told our friends, but we didn't tell anybody in a leadership position what happened, or we would have gotten in trouble. But from there, we road marched to other places, and the countryside in Germany is just absolutely beautiful, especially in the winter. And we did most of our walking at night, so you'd see the city light glows on the horizons, you know, through the clouds and the fog and stuff. And it was magical, man. And there was one night we stayed in this farmer's barn up in the hayloft. And that morning, the good wife had made all these like homemade breads and pastries and basically fed us breakfast. And man, that was some good food, man. And that was the first time I had ever seen or used a humanure toilet. Basically, it's a toilet that basically collects your poop. And they would use it as fertilizer. So, I mean, I'm not judging. But then we went on, and for the last 2 weeks, we pretty much stayed on one of the military bases in Germany, and we got to go on like a little leave, and we toured Nuremberg. Got to see, you know, some of the castles and some of the shops and experience, you know, German culture and go into the pubs and, you know, we just had a really good time and got to see the sights, take some pictures, had a lot of fun. Then we came back to the States and back to training. The next place we went to was I don't remember what it was called, but it was basically like aquatic landing type training for infantry, where you'd go out in like these U-boat type boats, and they would take you to a place and you would do maneuvers coming off the boat and basically taking a beach. And that was in Puerto Rico. So, and we first got there, man, it was raining cats and dogs, and we all got soaked. And then, you know, it's Puerto Rico, it's hot, it's sunny. I got so sunburned. I almost got written up with an Article 15, which is a disciplinary hearing for getting sunburned so bad because it, you know, damaging government property. You know, I wasn't using sunscreen or anything. And so they threatened me with that, and you know, because, you know, I wasn't able to function at peak performance. And then we went on this one mission out to an island off of Puerto Rico called Tiger Island, and it was the military base we were staying at was Roosevelt Roads Naval Base. That's where the Seabees are. They're like combat engineers. But we went out to this Tiger Island and did maneuvers, and it was a whole different climate. It was kind of deserty and scrub brush and rocky, where the rest of the island on Puerto Rico was like tropical, you know. So it was a very different environment. Very hard to find any shade, but we did, you know. And basically the Navy and the Marines had used that island at one point as like a bombing test site or something, but people actually lived there. At that point. So, you know, we kind of had fun. I took pictures with my friends and everything, and there was a Burger King on base, and we got to go to Burger King. And being in basic training, you had the people that like Burger King, and you had the people that like McDonald's, so everything became Burger Mac. So after Puerto Rico, we went to Panama for a month or so and did jungle warfare training. And we flew into Panama City and took a truck to the other side of the canal where an army base was, and we stayed at the army base. Well, we would go do, I remember we went to this one location. We had to go in trucks. It was quite a ways, but we did land navigation exercises. And that was kind of fun. But they had this like zoo on the base, and I got to see a lot of exotic animals. Like they had like a 50-foot ball python or a boa constrictor or something, but it was like 50 foot long. It was huge, and you had to watch out going through the jungle because there were monkeys there. And if you pissed off the monkeys, they would literally throw shit at you. So it wasn't anything to see people coming back from maneuvers, who had been pelted with shit. They'd have to go take showers. Damn, low battery already? I thought I had a full charge. I'm gonna have a hard time getting through these stories. So we had one night we were hiking through the jungle, and at that point I was a 60 gunner, so I was carrying the M60, which is a very big gun, and it comes with a spare barrel, and it comes with these canisters of bullets, because it's belt fed, where all the bullets are linked together in a belt, a chain, and it's fed through. Well, I didn't have an assistant gunner, so I was carrying the M60 and the spare barrel bag and the ammo. So you got to figure, I'm like 133 pounds, and my backpack weighs minimum of 150 pounds. And then I have the M60 and the spare barrel bag. So I'm this tiny guy carrying all this weight through jungle mountains. So every once in a while, somebody would come and get my spare barrel and carry it for me. But it got to be night, and we on our Kevlars, we would have these like bands, and on the back are these like sewn on bits of plastic that are reflective, like they glow in the dark. So you'd shine your light on it for a while, and it would glow in the dark for like a couple hours. And you had to keep the guy in front of you. We call them tiger eyes, because there were two of them on the back of their helmets. We'd have to be line of sight to the guy in front of us, so we wouldn't get lost, because it was pitch black. Well, we stopped for a long time at one point, and it turns out that one of the second lieutenants had walked off a cliff, and they were having to medevac him out. And he was injured pretty bad. I don't even know if he survived or not. I think he did, but he like broke both of his legs and had multiple injuries. So that was what was memorable about that. And that's where I also, my friend George said something about my wife, and I took a swing at him and ended up going off a step and landing on my knee. So I hurt my knee. And that's what's bothering me right now at work. So that's the story behind that. And we'd been drinking. Alcohol excuse. You know, and he apologized afterwards. He said, you know, he didn't have any right to say that. But it turned out he was true. But you know, first love, you know, type thing. Couldn't do no wrong. Anyway, I'll probably catch hell about that from some of the lurkers on my channel. Anyway, the next place I went was a 6-month stint in Honduras at Sotocana Air Base. That was a trip. So on one side of the base you have Army, on the other side of the base you have Marines, and it's kind of separated by an airstrip. So the base was definitely segregated because Army and Marines don't really get along. Yeah, if you put Marines and Army together, you usually have a barroom brawl break out, you know. So they had their bars on their side of the base. We had our bars on our side of the base. And the economy in Honduras is like $1 American is worth like 5 of theirs. So you went there with $100 and you were rich, you know. So whenever we got paid, man, we would, you know, hire some of the local women from town to come clean our barracks and stuff like that, you know, kind of, you know, bring us food. And I know one guy went out and got him an exotic bird and like shipped it back to the States. He got a permit for it and everything, and he shipped it back to his home. Because, you know, you got to have a permit to do that. And it has to stay in quarantine for so many days to make sure it's not bringing any exotic illnesses in. But he did that, and there was we would kind of rotate to this mountain on the coast, and there was a civilian listening post there for intelligence, and I won't give a location, but we would provide security for them. And so we're at this little compound at the top of this mountain, and we start hearing gunfire. And, you know, we'd been warned about, you know, rebel militia groups doing operations in the country, so we thought we were being attacked. And, you know, everybody gets out on the perimeter, and we got our live ammo and everything, and we're waiting for these rebels to come storming up, and the fire's getting closer, the gunfire's getting closer and closer, and eventually it stops, and, you know, we hear, you know, the all clear, stand down, and come to find out it was Navy SEALs doing training maneuvers, and they didn't know we were there. You know, nobody bothered to tell them there were friendlies in the area. So they almost got fired on with live rounds. If they would have come any closer, our CO would have given the order to you know, fire back. So the Navy SEALs kind of dodged a bullet there. But that was definitely an experience. I will never forget it. We had so much fun there. It was such an experience. And after that, we had some local training. We went to, we did training at Fort Irwin right outside of Barstow in Death Valley. Luckily it was in like December, so it wasn't too cold. But there were dust storms. That was not fun. It's the only time I've bought ski goggles and there was no snow. You know, because that sand got everywhere. But it would get down to like 18 degrees at night, but it would get up to the 80s during the day. So it was cold at night, yes, but and that was really the first time I'd ever been in the desert, and I loved it. You know, every little hill and mountain out there I wanted to climb. You know, it was just I'm an explorer. I like to explore things. You know, I'm constantly, when I'm traveling, I see something interesting and I say, I wish I could go up there. That's one of the reasons I want to go through hiking. So I'm hiking, I see something that looks interesting, I can go there. You know, more than likely, you know, unless it's on private property. So, you know, that's going to be fun to do. You know, no real restrictions on where I have to go, other than I have to make a continuous footpath from Springer Mountain to Katahdin. But we did our training there, and towards the end we would have to police call the desert and pick up any trash we find. I actually found a backpack, or not a backpack, a sleeping bag that somebody had lost, so I got to keep it. And another guy found a pair of night vision goggles that he didn't report. He kept them. So them things are expensive. The PS5s, for any of you guys that know what that is. So after that we did mount training, which is urban training, you know, training going from like building to building, room to room. We did that at Fort Pickett, Virginia, and that was kind of fun. But that's about the time when me and the Army started having a love-hate relationship, really bad, mainly hate. And that was also about the time that Desert Storm kicked up. So there in the last year or so of me being in, we had been put on standby for Desert Storm. And of course, that was, you know, the first time a military conflict had ever been like televised live on like CNN. So we got to watch the whole thing unfold on CNN as we're basically on standby waiting to go, you know. But the engagement was so short. The Republican Guard, Iraqi Republican Guard, surrendered like a couple of weeks in, and the only American deaths that happened were due to accidents. So really it was kind of a bloodless war. I'm not sure if any of the Republican Guard had been shot and killed or anything, but I remember the mass surrenders. They were just surrendering in, I mean, like a whole company or brigade of these Republican Guard soldiers would like surrender to 2 American soldiers, or, you know, a squad. You know, it was just unreal. I mean, this small group of guys comes back with this huge group of prisoners. And I won't say it was a bloodless war, because there was the ship that was attacked, and there was also the barracks bombing, the Scud missiles. And we had a guy, an E6, a staff sergeant, who volunteered to go over there, Sergeant Schatz, or Schatz, or it was Schatz. He was in the barracks when it was bombed, and he did not survive. So I do know a fellow soldier who died in combat while I was in. technically. But then it ended, and we all received accommodations for being put on standby. Army Achievement Medals, not accommodation. We got Army Achievement Medals for basically being on standby to go to war. And, you know, there was mixed feelings about that. I mean, because people did die. You know, now that I remember that, I kind of regret saying that it was a bloodless war. It was not a bloodless war. I apologize for saying that. So it wasn't long after that I got out of the Army. But there was one other time we were doing, basically we were in the field doing maneuvers, and it came a blizzard, and our lieutenant did not want to go back to the barracks, and basically set up the command tent, which was this big huge canvas tent with a stove, and we all have basically our ponchos with bungee cords to put up with sleeping bags, and that's it. So we were freezing our freaking asses off. People were starting to get frostnip, and a very real possibility of getting frostbite. That's the second low battery warning. So my sergeant at the time, my squad leader, or platoon leader, basically went off base to a retired colonel's house and called trucks. And the trucks came to get there. The lieutenant's like, "What the hell is this? Blah, blah, blah." And the sergeant came up there and said, "Look, sir, I called the trucks. What you were doing is not safe." And of course, by this time, the captain's been made aware of the situation, and the lieutenant gets in trouble for not making the decision to come back. But technically, the sergeant did wrong by disregarding orders and going on a rogue mission, disobeying direct orders. So he got in trouble too. He got busted back down from an E6 to an E4, back to a specialist. And it wasn't long after that I was having problems with my wife. We were separated, and things were not going well, and it was affecting my work. And they gave me the decision and say, "Okay, look, you can either, you know, straighten up and fly right, you know, fix your marriage, or you can get out of the Army." And I chose to get out of the Army. And that basically kind of solidified the thing with my wife at the time. And I went back to Texas, and she stayed in New York for 9 months. But it wasn't until after I got out that my unit was deployed to Haiti first, to put down Baby Doc, the warlord or whatever, or the dictator that was taking over Haiti at the time. And then they went to Somalia to battle some warlords that were trying to take over. Then they went to Bosnia during the Bosnian conflict with the ethnic cleansing and everything that was going on. And then after that, there was the first and the second Gulf War in Iraq, and then all the tours in Iraq and Afghanistan after that with the Taliban. And, you know, I got out before all of that. So my experience in the Army was very, very different from guys today. And I just wanted to take this time to share some of my experiences in the Army with you guys. So that was my stories from the trail for this episode. A little bit of nonfiction, biographical, my biography. And I don't know, maybe I should put that into a book and kind of say, hey, it wasn't always as bad as it is now. And this is some experiences from a period of peace in the Army. Because the biggest thing that we had go on, I think, while we were in, I don't know if the Ollie North thing happened before I joined or after, but that was the big, the arms deals to the Nicaragua, Oliver North, for those of you who remember that. That was the biggest thing that happened in that time period, I think that might have been the mid 80s, before I went in. But yeah, there were no conflicts other than the Desert Storm, Desert Shield, the first Gulf War, when I was in. And I remember, we were kind of scared when we got put on standby to go over there, because it was, quote unquote war. And it was, but it wasn't like Afghanistan and Iraq. Nowhere near that. So, and that was before the Twin Towers and all of that. So our country was basically in the midst of a decade-long peace. Basically from the early 70s to the mid to late 80s. A good 10, 15 years of peace. So, yeah. That's pretty much it for the story. And I thank y'all for listening to me. And I'm glad I got this chance to kind of share my stories with you guys. I've never really sat down and talked like this about them to anybody. I've told stories, but I've never told the whole story in one sitting. So I thank you guys for listening to me. On a note, I did witness some other deaths while I was in. There was a recruit from another battalion while I was in basic training that basically kept a live round from a live fire exercise, and he killed himself with his own weapon. And he was like a week away from graduation. It made no sense. And suicide rarely does. But there was also an incident in Honduras where a helicopter crashed in dense fog into the side of a mountain, and we were sent to basically search for survivors. And we got there, pretty soon after it crashed. They trucked us up there, and we walked in, and there was like 6 people, 5 guys and 1 woman. And the guys had been thrown clear. They were all dead, but the woman was trapped inside, and the helicopter was engulfed in flames, and we could hear her screaming, and there wasn't anything we could do about it. That was very, very hard to go through. And is still hard to think about. Because, I mean, how do you process that? Somebody dying and you can't do anything about it. So, yeah, those are my stories, and thank y'all for listening. As you may have been able to tell, my battery died right as I said that last sentence. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out the video officially. It's the next day, well, later on in the day. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you found any worth or entertainment in this episode, go ahead and hit that like button, and go ahead and swipe that notification bell to be notified of any future videos that I upload. So until next time, which will probably be tonight, for another daily walk and talk, I will see y'all later. Y'all stay safe and have a great day. Bye.